Barry Meier he worked for a long time as a New York Times reporter. He's the author of Painkiller, an Empire of Deceit. And he's been writing lately about the fact that major pharmaceutical companies knew opioids were highly addictive, but were claiming quite explicitly otherwise. And Mr. Meyer joins us now. Barry, how are you?
I'm very good. Thanks so much for having me on.
Oh, it's our pleasure. You know, one of the frustrations in observing the media these days, and we were just talking about this in another context, is that there's so much Stormy Daniels and Trump gossip and the rest of it. You've got a story as incredibly important as this one, to us not getting nearly enough attention. But having said that, what should we know about the marketing, the claims about your opioids by the companies and how that compares to reality?
Well, this story dealt specifically with the drug that has sort of become the symbol of the opioid epidemic, a drug called Oxycontin, which was made by a company, Purdue Pharma. For years, this company was promoting this drug as less abusable and less prone to addiction than competing opioids. And when the problems publicly exploded with Oxycontin, they claimed that, well, we just found out about this. We just learned about this in early 2000. In fact, the Justice Department, which did an extensive investigation of the company in the early 2000s, found out that, or concluded that the company knew about this almost immediately after the drug was introduced. So for 3 years, they were getting dozens, if not hundreds of reports related to the apparent abuse of this drug that they were concealing. They weren't letting doctors know about that. They weren't letting regulators know about that. They, according to the prosecutors, they were essentially covering it up.
Is it the sort of thing, though, where, should they have had to disclose it because the very nature of their drug was especially bad? Or was it, more like I'm selling hammers, turns out people are hitting themselves in the head with hammers? How is that my fault? Is there culpability in your mind on Purdue Pharma?
I think here there specifically is, because they were given a special claim by the FDA. They were allowed to claim that this drug was essentially different than every other painkiller because it was a long-acting drug, and so it would be less attractive to drug abusers than shorter-acting painkillers like Vicodin or Percocet. So they had this special claim, and this claim was the sort of cornerstone of their massive promotion of Oxycontin. This became a billion-dollar drug.
And then it turns out it's actually more addictive than those other drugs?
It is certainly as addictive, as abusable. And once they became aware of that, I don't know what their exact legal responsibilities were, but certainly there was an imperative that they alert people that this drug can be abused as easily as any other drug.
Absolutely. I'm a guy who is really careful about using any painkillers. I stay away from them if I can at all, because I'm worried about, getting addicted. And if I'm told by a company, this is much less addictive, well, then I think, okay, I'll take my chance with this one.
Right.
I've been lied to in a way that could really affect me.
Well, and not only that, you're talking about yourself as a patient, or me as a patient. This is what was being said to doctors. This is what was being said to hospitals. This was being said to the people who were sort of the gatekeepers to our medical care. And as a result of these
that's a crime.
Claims being made, they were, prescribing this stuff to beat the band.
So when you say it was on the way to being a billion-dollar drug, is that an annual figure eventually over its lifetime?
Yes, it became, selling between $1.5 to $2 billion. The Sacklers, the very secretive and wealthy company that owns Purdue Pharma, became like number 14 or 15 on the Forbes wealthiest Americans.
Well, obviously the question is, was it selling so well? And it probably was selling so well because of their claim that you wouldn't get addicted to this stuff. So that's the reason it was making so much money.
Absolutely. Yeah. Otherwise it would not have been, it would have been just a kind of Me Too, common narcotic painkiller.
Yeah, congratulations, you invented another Vicodin, big deal.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, and I see in your piece a number of different quotes from folks with Purdue Pharma saying, well, we weren't informed. We didn't see a pattern, or this is an isolated case. And you're pretty strongly calling them on those statements.
People are
free to claim what they believe. Maybe they wanted, felt, when do we run up the white flag on this? I don't know. I can't look in their minds. I can't look in their hearts. All I can say is that when federal prosecutors examined this, they believed that this company had effectively covered this up, and they wanted to indict these executives, the very people saying, oh, this is no big deal, on very serious felony charges, and were prevented from doing so by top officials within the Justice Department.
God dang it. So this opioid epidemic we got going on in the country, and it is, the president declared it a national emergency or whatever. There are a number of different things going. You got this one where you got a company lying, saying, no, this one's not addictive, so that gets people hooked. You've got companies that are, sending a million pills to one pharmacy in a tiny town because they know they're shopping them out to fake doctors. So we got a bunch of different reasons this is happening, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, if we really want to figure out how to deal with this epidemic, and it's very complex, and there's not one single solution, we have to understand how it started. And I think, when I wrote Painkiller originally in 2003, I began to tell that story, and the new edition that's out now kind of brings this story full circle, and I think sheds tremendous amount of light on some ways that we can start working ourselves out of this mess.
Barry Meier is referring to his book Painkiller, an Empire of Deceit. I assume you're pretty up on the fentanyl situation these days?
Yeah, it's a terrible situation. I mean, essentially you have two separate problems going on. You have the potential overuse and abuse of legal prescription painkillers, and then you have this flood in the last few years of counterfeit versions of fentanyl coming in from places like, Mexico and China. And, the recent kind of spurt in deaths are largely related to these counterfeit versions of fentanyl. But bear in mind, over 200,000 Americans have died since the late 1990s from overdoses involving legal prescription drugs, prescription painkillers.
Right.
And 100,000, half of those people died between 2007 and 2012, which were the 5 years after this case was settled. And the critical documents that are in Painkiller and were in the New York Times yesterday were basically swept under the rug because of the government settlement with Purdue.
Right, and I don't want to distract from the full weight of that, but what I'm thinking in terms of, I read recently that fentanyl busted the border up 700 times or something like that, and they busted a truck in Nebraska that they think had enough fentanyl to kill 26 million people. Because as little as 2 milligrams can be fatal. I could easily see a second wave of death and horror that was started by what you're talking about in your book and our conversation right now, leading to all these junkies we've created now, all these addicts, desperate for a fix, getting some fentanyl accidentally.
So I got hooked on the non-addictive Oxycontin,
thanks
supposedly.
to Purdue Pharma's efforts.
And now I'm taking fentanyl.
Yeah, and I could see a new wave of horror.
Unfortunately, that has been, that has been the case for a number of people. And, it's like there is a part of this problem that's essentially, like a law enforcement problem, which is the fentanyl end of the problem. And then there's the legal side of the problem, sort of the Oxycontin side of the problem.
Right.
And, it's sort of like these two things have to be dealt with almost separately. And most of all, the people who become addicted, be it through legal narcotics or illegal narcotics, we need to treat them. We need to deal with them compassionately. And, throwing them into a program and giving them 12 days of some sort of, a drug to try to get, wean them off their addiction is not going to be adequate. I mean, if we really want to make a dent in this problem, the money and the resources for addiction treatment also need to be made available.
I'm not the suing type, but man, if my son, wife, mom died from Oxycontin when they were told that it was non-addictive, and the company knew it was. I'd want a chunk of freaking money.
Yeah. Listen,
just to punish them.
We're already running a little late, Barry, but as briefly as you can, tell us about the settlement you referenced.
Oh, okay. So in 2007, after a 4-year government investigation, Purdue Pharma agreed to pay $600 million in fines for misrepresenting the abuse and addiction risks.
For a drug they're making $1 billion a year on?
Yeah. And 3 top company executives pled guilty to misdemeanors related to the company's marketing of the drug, but these particular charges did not hold them personally liable or blame them. However, what the prosecutors we now know wanted to charge them with were serious felonies, everything from conspiracy to false statements. So there would have been a trial. There would have been a big, high-profile trial of corporate drug executives.
And there wasn't. Why?
Because top officials in the George Bush administration blocked that from happening.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And,
yeah, it is.
And we know the drug industry gives a hell of a lot of money to a hell of a lot of politicians.
Oh, yeah.
Indeed we do.
Yeah, Barry Meier, Origins of an Epidemic. I'm sorry, the actual title of the book has been removed from my eyes for some reason.
Origins of an Epidemic. Purdue Pharma knew it.
Painkiller.
Okay.
Painkiller. There you go. Barry, great to talk to you. I hope we can do it again. Well done.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Yeah. Good to talk. Thanks.
That's troubling. That's really troubling. We'll discuss that a little more coming up. But man, oh man, that's just so maddening. And like I said, this is one of like 4 different angles that these companies have gotten these drugs out there, and the government has worked with them in a variety of ways to allow it to happen.
Right. Well, if you had lobbyists spreading around the money that they are, you could get a lot done too.
God dang it. Our text line is 415-295-KFTC. You're listening to the Armstrong and Getty Show.
Armstrong and Getty.
The conscience of the nation.